One night, at a lavish party in a grand mansion, the patriarch, while dining with his two sons, their families, and other guests, decides to announce that he will marry one of their servants. Everyone is stunned by this revelation, especially his two sons, who find their father's actions absurd. However, no one can predict that this fateful night will forever change the destiny of everyone involved. A few hours earlier, the entire Thevasadat Pazern mansion is busy preparing for its master's birthday, Rungroj Thevasadat Pazern, a diamond tycoon. In the house are his two sons, Fupat and Marvin, along with their wives and children, Fupat's wife, Padcha, and their daughter, Kita, Marvin's wife, Araya, and their son, Shutter, who has just returned from studying in New York to attend his grandfather's birthday party. The Thevasadat Pazern mansion has a large staff of servants, one of whom is Kaimuk, who is assigned to take care of the master. Kaimuk brings tea and food to Rungroj's room, where she sees Fupat and Marvin trying to persuade Rungroj to sign deals with their respective clients. However, Rungroj is clearly unconvinced and asks Kaimuk for her opinion on the matter. She suggests that if the deals are not urgent, there is no need to rush. Rungroj praises her and reprimands his sons for not being able to think as clearly as a servant. After Fupat and Marvin leave, Rungroj tells Kaimuk that she will have a much brighter future. Kaimuk then gives Rungroj a back massage, hinting at a possible relationship between them. That evening, when all the guests have arrived and are seated at the dining table, Kaimuk helps Rungroj get ready and accompanies him to the dining room. Both sons are eager to win their father's favor, presenting him with expensive and unique gifts. Marvin gives Rungroj a Rolex present, while Fupat arranges for a 111-year-old bonsai to be brought in. However, Rungroj is unimpressed and wants to announce something else to everyone. He has decided to marry Kaimuk. His lawyer presents the marriage license form, and the couple signs it right there at the table. Everything happens so quickly, leaving everyone shocked and disgusted. Rungroj then proceeds to place a large ruby necklace, which once belonged to his late wife, around Kaimuk's neck, much to Fupat's dismay. Right after that, Rungroj excuses himself and retreats to his room with Kaimuk. Marvin sees his father's new marriage as an opportunity, so he follows them. He suggests that his father go on a honeymoon with Kaimuk and leave the business for him to manage. Rungroj chuckles and tells Marvin that he knows how he operates and would rather let a servant handle the business than trust Marvin with it. Too stunned to respond, Marvin glares at Kaimuk with resentment before leaving. After the party, Fupat, upset, goes outside to drink. Upin, the housekeeper and the family's oldest maid, approaches to comfort him and advises him to speak directly with his father. Meanwhile, in Rungroj's room, he notices that Kaimuk seems uneasy. When he asks her about it, she confides that she is afraid of his sons. He reassures her, promising to protect her, and invites her to move into his room. As they are about to kiss, Fupat bursts in, interrupting them. Fupat wants to speak with Rungroj in private and complains about his father giving Kaimuk his mother's necklace. Rungroj dismisses his son, claiming he can do whatever he wants. Downstairs, Marvin is having an affair with Kay, one of the maids. When she asks if she could be like Kaimuk by marrying her master, Marvin becomes angry and chokes her. After being dismissed by his father, Fupat returns to his room and takes a liquid drug to get high. Meanwhile, Marvin rushes back to Rungroj's room to confront him again. Shortly afterward, Kaimuk, downstairs, sees her newlywed husband falling from his balcony and screams in despair. Rungroj dies that night, and his funeral is held. Before the ceremony, Kaimuk sits in front of Rungroj's casket until the Thevasadat Pazern family arrives, and Araya forces her to stand with the servants, saying the seats are reserved for the family. At the ceremony, Fupat delivers a eulogy honoring his hard-working father and promises to take over the family business. After the funeral, Kaimuk speaks with a police officer about Rungroj's death, trying to convince him that she believes Rungroj was murdered. However, the officer dismisses her concerns, stating that the case is closed and ruled as an accident. Meanwhile, Marvin searches for the family lawyer, Krit, asking about the details of Rungroj's will. Krit advises him to wait until the official reading. Marvin then requests a private meeting with Kaimuk and offers her money to leave the house. When Kaimuk refuses, Marvin abandons her in the middle of nowhere during a heavy rainstorm. After walking all night, Kaimuk finally makes it back to the mansion, determined to uncover the truth behind her late husband's death. The next day, Kaimuk, who has now moved into Rungroj's room, is still haunted by her husband's death and is afraid to deal with his children. The family gathers in the dining room for breakfast, except for Fupat, who has left early for a work meeting, and Kaimuk. The women discuss the upcoming polo charity event, and Marvin instructs Shutter to prepare well for the match, noting that the opposing team is also a business rival. At that moment, Kaimok walks in, and Araya immediately mocks her by sarcastically calling her mother. Kita and Shutter abruptly leave the table, making Kaimok feel even worse. As the maids serve Kaimok breakfast, she finds a hair in her soup. Araya decides to make a scene, calling all the maids and pretending to want to find and punish the one who has tainted Kaimok's soup. Padshah intervenes, pointing out that the hair is red and clearly belongs to Araya, the only redhead in the household. Meanwhile, at Thiva Gems, the urgent meeting Fupad left early for is with the shareholders, where he convinces them to oust Marvin from the board and make him the sole executive. As soon as Marvin is informed, he rushes to the meeting and threatens the shareholders, demanding they leave the room. The two brothers argue, with Fupad explaining that his actions are to protect the company's image from Marvin's scandalous reputation. Marvin doesn't believe him and declares a war between them over who will control the company. Back at the mansion, Kaimok is working on Rungrod's butterfly specimens when a maid named B brings her a snack. B suggests that Kaimok should leave because the family hates her, but Kaimok says she can't leave yet as she still needs to uncover the truth. Just then, Araya calls Kaimok over, speaking in a condescending tone and offering to help her prepare for the charity event. They later go to a tailor, where Araya has a red gown made for Kaimok. While they are out, the maids at home watch a show featuring Araya as an actress. Cave sneaks into Araya's closet, tries on one of her fancy dresses, drinks some wine, and throws up. A flashback shows that she and her boyfriend, Tian, were recruited by Marvin. Cade as a maid and Tian as Marvin's driver, though they pretended to be siblings. That night, Marvin invites Crit to dinner and tries to bribe him to change the will, making Marvin the sole beneficiary. Crit refuses again and leaves the table, saying that his daughter is waiting for him outside. Furious, Marvin calls Tian and gives him some orders at the mansion. Fupat and Padshah talk on the phone, even though they are in the same house. Padshah tells her husband that their daughter wants to study in New York instead of Paris as they had planned, but Fupat interrupts her, insisting they stick to the original plan. Meanwhile, Marvin hooks up with Kay in his basement again. When she tells him she is pregnant, he becomes angry, beats her, and demands she abort the child. Kay later tells Tian about the pregnancy. Without hesitation, he says he is willing to be a father, even when Kay hints that the baby might not be his. However, Kay doesn't think it is a good idea given their situation. At the mansion, Kaimok tries to find the CCTV footage of Rungrod's balcony, but the guard says it has been deleted. The next day, at the polo match, Padkara and Fetty from Gentle Gems argue with Marvin about their businesses. Fupad joins the conversation, and Padkara suggests that Gentle Gems and Thiva Gems work together to take on the global market. Fupad agrees with the idea, but Marvin disagrees. Marvin becomes even more furious when their polo team loses the match, and Shutter disappoints him. That night, Kaimok shows up at the charity event in her red gown, only to realize it is a trap set by Araya to humiliate her since the event's dress code is black and white. She hears people making remarks about her outfit, calling her desperate for attention. The humiliation doesn't end there. The host then calls her on stage to give a speech as the late Rungrod's wife, and it has to be in English. Kaimok hasn't expected to give a speech, let alone in English, so she struggles. Araya steps up and delivers a well-prepared speech, enhancing her and her husband's image. Fupat and Padshah are shocked at the scene, as Fupat had expected to be the one giving the honorary speech. During the event, Marvin shows Crit a video of his daughter, Amy, using drugs. He uses this footage to blackmail Crit into changing Rungrod's will. Meanwhile, Tian takes Ko to an abortion clinic. Later that night, Kaimok decides to return to her job as a maid, telling Araya that she no longer wishes to be a part of the Thevasadat Pazern family. Araya smirks and humiliates Kaimok by whistling and calling Kaimok to stay under her foot like a dog. Kita meets her two friends, Dom and Abel, and shows them the outfits she has designed. Dom suggests that Kita's maid, B, should model the outfit so they can take photos. B poses in the dress, and Abel and Dom praise her, which makes Kita jealous. To embarrass B, Kita tells her to change clothes in front of them. B asks if she can change in the bathroom, but Kita strips her naked in front of everyone and tells Dom to take a photo of her. B feels embarrassed, and Abel gives her his jacket to cover herself. Later that evening, while Bea is washing Kita's dog, she gets a call from her sister, who says they need more money for their mother's medical treatment. Bea's sister offers to get a job, but Bea tells her to keep studying instead. Kita then comes in and gets angry at Bea for talking on the phone during work. She hits Bea and tells her to finish designing the outfits for her collection, revealing that Bea has been doing all the design work, not Kita. Meanwhile, Yupin asks Kaimuk to clean the storage room, where she finds a butterfly that Rungroj had collected. Seeing it reminds Kaimuk of the night Rungroj proposed to her. At the same time, Padcha informs Kita that her dad is determined to send her to Paris to study fashion design. Upset by the news, Kita heads to the club to meet up with her friends. While there, her cousin Shutter arrives. Kita becomes jealous when another girl gets close to Shutter, and she storms off. Shutter follows her outside, where his driver, Joke, who is also Bea's boyfriend, calls Bea to ask if she wants to hang out. But Shutter and Kita show up, and Shutter asks Joke to drive them home. On the way home, Kita and Shutter kiss and make out, which shocks Joke. The next day, the Thevasadat Pazern family gathers for the reading of Rungroj's will. Crick reads that Rungroj left a 10% stake in Theva Gems to Padcha and a 15% stake to Araya. He also announces that a 30% stake has been left to Fupat, while Marvin receives a 45% stake, making him the main heir. The other maids listen in from outside and are shocked to learn that Rungroj didn't leave anything to Kaimuk. Meanwhile, Fupat refuses to accept the will and tells Crit he will have it investigated. Araya and Marvin celebrate their victory, while Fupat becomes distraught. That night, Kaimuk goes to meet with Fupat and Padcha. She returns Fupat's late mother's necklace and talks to him about Rungroj's death. Kaimuk tells Fupat that she saw Marvin running out of Rungroj's room right after he fell from the balcony. She claims Marvin threatened to kill her and worries that Marvin might have killed Rungroj. Fupat, however, refuses to believe her since she has no evidence against Marvin. Kaimuk promises to find proof to support her suspicions. That night, Kaimuk and Bea sit in the yard, and Bea tries to cheer Kaimuk up. The two maids have some beers in Bea's room and talk about the collection Bea was making for Kita. Suddenly, Kaimuk notices that Bea's laptop has video files from the camera on Kita's dog's collar. In one of the video, Kaimuk sees Shutter hastily leaving a room in the middle of the night. The next morning, Fupat is blocked from entering the board floor. Marvin informs Fupat that he has removed him from the company's board of executives. Fupat is furious but powerless to do anything about it. That night, Dom and Abel discover Bea working on the outfit designs for Kita. Kita overhears her friends making fun of her and quickly goes to find Shutter. She asks Shutter to take her away. Shutter asks Kita to wait a little longer so they can move to New York together. Later, Kita goes to her studio and punishes Bea by forcing her hand into a sewing machine. Bea runs out of the house, her hand bleeding badly. Joke sees her, horrified by what has happened, and quickly takes her to a doctor. The next day, Marvin invites everyone to his promotion party at the mansion. Before the event, Marvin meets Shutter, hugs him, and apologizes for not being there for him over the years. Meanwhile, Kita asks Shutter to meet her in her studio. At the party, Kaimuk is working as a maid. Bea lets Kita's dog loose, sending it to the studio where Kita is hooking up with Shutter. During the party, Marvin surprises the guests with a diamond shower, while Fupat gives a bitter speech about his younger brother's succession. Suddenly, a live streaming video of Shutter and Kita having fun starts playing in front of the party guests, causing Araya to faint. Marvin quickly tries to stop the video, while Fupat heads straight to Kita's studio. When he arrives, he punches Shutter, but Padcha stops him, giving Shutter a chance to run away. Outside, Marvin catches up with Shutter and angrily confronts him. Shutter fires back, saying Marvin should be grateful because he covered up the CCTV footage of Marvin killing Rungroj. Meanwhile, Kaimuk finds the hidden CCTV footage in Shutter's room. Shutter rushes to his room to find the CD with the video, but he panics when he realizes it's gone. He quickly leaves the house in his car, and Marvin sends Tion to bring him back. Meanwhile, Padcha is disgusted when Kita confesses to her parents that she loves Shutter. While driving, Shutter is pursued by a biker. The biker forces him off the road, drags him out of his car, and viciously beats him, leaving him for dead in the middle of the street. A flashback from a few years ago reveals that Shutter was driving drunk when he struck and killed a pedestrian. Instead of taking responsibility, he framed his driver, Joke, for the incident. The scene shifts back to the present, where Shutter is in the hospital in critical condition. Doctors inform Maven and Araya that Shutter's heart is not functioning properly, leaving them deeply concerned. Padshaw considers using her father's influence to help Shutter, but Fupat disagrees, insisting that Shutter should face the consequences of his scandalous affair with Kita. Desperate, Maven pleads with the doctors to do whatever it takes to save his son. He then confronts Joke, who is also injured and hospitalized, and attacks him for failing to protect Shutter. Meanwhile, Kita becomes hysterical and demands to see Shutter at the hospital. Fupat forbids her from doing so and tells her that now is the time for her to go to New York. Padshaw pleads with Fupat to be more understanding of Kita's feelings, but he dismisses her concerns. Downstairs, Kaimuk confronts B, accusing her of leaking the video of Kita and Shutter's affair. B does not respond and leaves the room. As B sits on the porch with Kita's dog, Marvin approaches her with a sinister look. Later, Kaimuk presents CCTV footage to Fupat, showing Maven entering Rungroj's room shortly before his death. This evidence convinces Fupat that Maven orchestrated Rungroj's murder. Kay starves herself after aborting the child, and Tian tries, unsuccessfully, to comfort her. The next day, Kaimuk finds that B is absent, and Yupin informs her that B is on a break. Fupat calls the police and hands them the CCTV footage, requesting a reopening of the investigation. Yupin tells the maids that the police have returned to investigate Rungroj's death and urges them to cooperate fully. During the investigation, the police question the maids and uncover information about Kaimuk's recent marriage to Rungroj. Kaimuk is also interrogated and explains that she had previously urged detectives to consider the possibility of murder. The police inform Fupat that they now have sufficient evidence against Maven and plan to question him once he returns from the hospital. However, that evening, the detective calls Fupat to inform him that a superior has ordered them to drop the case. Both he and Kaimuk are too stunned to speak. Later that night, Maven orders Cave to come to his place. The deputy commissioner calls Maven to report that they've identified the person responsible for attacking Shutter, and Maven demands the culprit be handed over to him. At the bar, he commands Kao to act like a dog before engaging with her. Meanwhile, Padshaw comforts Kaimuk, who is distressed that Maven escaped justice due to his wealth and influence. The next morning, Kaimuk takes the day off to search for B, who hasn't responded to her texts. Before leaving, she notices the maids setting up a projector under Maven's orders. Kaimuk goes to B's house and meets her sister, who tells her that B hasn't been home for months. At the company, Fupat learns that Maven fired him in retaliation for going to the police. He also discovers that the investigation has been dropped and that the police superior confiscated the CCTV footage. That night, Joke is discharged from the hospital, and Maven and Tian pick him up. Maven tells Tian to drive them to a bridge, where he orders Tian to push Joke off. At that moment, Tian confesses that he attacked Shutter as revenge for what Maven did to Kay when the baby. Maven pulls out a gun and starts beating Tian, threatening to kill Joke unless he pushes Tian off the bridge. Joke refuses, but Tian jumps off the bridge to save his brother. A flashback reveals Joke's attempt to stop Tian from attacking Shutter. Joke even asks Tian to beat him as well, pretending to have defended Shutter from a random attacker. In the present, Joke looks down at his brother's lifeless body beneath the bridge, screaming in anguish. Back at the mansion, Kaimuk returns only to find the maids watching a disturbing video of B being held captive in a cage, begging for her release. A flashback shows Maven and Fupat when they were younger. While the two brothers are playing, a fight breaks out because Fupat accuses Maven of cheating. Rungroj enters the room and punishes both brothers, telling Fupat that even if Maven cheated, he should still find a way to win. In the present, Maven is on the phone discussing his plans to buy a diamond mine from a man named Carlos. Fupat confronts him, and Maven explains that he heard Gentle Gems wanted to buy it, so he had to move ahead of them. Fupat isn't happy about this because Carlos is his friend, but Maven tells his brother to shut his mouth and says Fupat should move out of the mansion. Araya asks Maven to accompany her to the hospital to see Shutter, who is still in critical condition. On the phone, Padshaw tells Kita that Shutter is awaiting a heart transplant. Kita, who is in New York attending a fashion course, tells her mother that she's worried about Shutter's health. Just then, Fupat enters and asks Padshaw to get help from her father to assist Shutter. He tells Padshaw that he wants to blackmail Araya into giving him 15% of Thiva Gems shares so he can gain a total of 55% and become the majority shareholder of Thiva Gems. Kita overhears her father's plan and feels disappointed, Meanwhile, Kaimuk turns off the TV in the servants' quarters to avoid seeing be trapped in a cage. Yufan comes in and turns the TV back on, telling Kaimuk that B is facing punishment for her wrongdoings. Yufan adds that this serves as a warning to the other servants in the house. That night, Kei asks Joke about Tian. When Joke doesn't respond, Kei realizes something is wrong. She breaks down in tears when she realizes that Tian is dead. The next day, Padshah meets Araya at the hospital and offers to help with Shutter's heart transplant in exchange for Araya's shares in Thiva Gems. Meanwhile, B is returned to her room after her torture session, and Kaimuk tends to her. Kaimuk scolds Joke for not standing up for B and for failing to protect her from Marvin. That night, Maven calls Kaimuk to his room and humiliates her by taking a picture up her skirt. Maven tells Kaimuk that she and the other servants are his property and orders her to obey him. The next day, Yufan gathers all the maids and servants to prepare for an event on a cruise organized by Maven. Meanwhile, Araya signs over all her shares to Fupat after Shutter successfully finds a heart donor, thanks to Padshah's help. Padshah brings the documents to Fupat and reminds him to keep his promise. The couple returns home, and Maven thanks Padshah for helping with Shutter's surgery. Fupat tells Maven that he will take over the company from that day forward. But Maven reveals that he has already taken most of Araya's shares, so Fupat still doesn't have more shares than Maven. Maven mocks Fupat for making such a big mistake. Enraged, Fupat demands Padshah stop the heart transplant. That night, at a bar, Maven asks Keo to reenact killing him for Tian's death, and then hooks up with her. The next day, on the yacht, Maven tries to impress a business partner named Carlos. Carlos and Maven go flyboarding at sea, but suddenly Maven's board loses power, and he falls into the water. Fupat shows up and entertains Carlos while Maven struggles to return to the yacht. Fupat tries to get back at Marvin by threatening to sabotage his deal with Carlos. That evening, Fupat, Maven, and Carlos play poker as Kaimuk serves them drinks. Maven notices that Carlos is paying attention to Kaimuk. Maven suggests spicing up the game and wagers Kaimuk. Carlos wins, and the brothers help him take Kaimuk back to his boat, where Carlos begins to assault her. Fupat, Maven, and Joke head back to their yacht when suddenly the boat catches fire and explodes. A flashback shows that when Fupat was young, he broke one of Rungroj's glass boxes. A young Yupin took the blame to save Fupat. Rungroj punished Yupin by beating her and chaining her under the table. Fupat apologized to Yupin for making her take the blame for him and said he hated his father. In the present, on the speedboat returning to the yacht, Maven drinks wine and gradually becomes intoxicated. At that moment, the fireworks that Maven had ordered were set off, and everyone on the yacht gazed in awe. Maven starts to insult Fupat and asks if he was the one who killed their father, but Fupat says nothing. Maven realizes that he has been drugged and collapses. It turns out that Fupat and Joke had planned this all along to get rid of Maven. Joke struggles to throw Maven into the sea but has difficulty, so Fupat pushes Joke aside and throws Maven into the water himself. They then put on life jackets and jump into the sea after Joke sets the boat on fire to stage it as an accident. Carlos sees the burning boat from his yacht and rushes out in panic, while Kaimuk takes advantage of the moment to sneak out. She runs to meet B and K, while Yupin frantically calls the police. The rescue team saves Fupat and Joke but cannot find Maven. After a while, the rescue team announces that Maven has been found alive underwater. The maids are worried because Maven is still alive, and Keo blames Joke for not ensuring Maven's death. A flashback shows that Fupat conspired to kill Maven along with Kaimuk and the other servants. Kaimuk urges Fupat to do something because if Maven wakes up, they will not live in peace. Fupat runs to the rescue vehicle, pretending to be concerned for Maven, and bribes the driver to take Maven to the city hospital, claiming that even though it's far, Maven will receive the best care. However, deep down, Fupat hopes his brother will die on the way to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Fupat thinks about his childhood and the fond memories with Maven, softening his heart. However, those memories are always tied to how poorly Maven treated him. Not long after, Maven dies on the ride to the hospital. At Maven's funeral, Fupat delivers a eulogy for his brother and announces that he will take over Thiva Gems after Maven's sudden death. Yupin follows Fupat's orders and gives money to the maids to keep quiet about what happened, but Kaimuk refuses to accept it and returns it to him. Kaimuk asks Fupat if she can hold a ceremony to honor Rungroj's 100th day memorial. And he agrees. That night, Crick calls Fupat and confesses that Maven had blackmailed him into forging Rungroj's will, and he is currently abroad under Maven's orders. Fupat tells Crit to bring their father's will back to Thailand. After discovering what Maven has done, Fupat smashes Araya's belongings, torments her, and kicks her out of the house. The next day, Fupat picks a fight again and demands that all the servants be fired. Seeing that Fupat is becoming more unreasonable, Padshah asks for a divorce and her share of Thiva gems as per their agreement. Fupat refuses to give Padshah anything and kicks her out of the house. Kaimuk once again goes to the police station and requests an investigation into Rungroj's death. This time as his wife, asking the police to conduct an autopsy. That evening, Fupat invites Padkara and Fetty from Gentle Gems over for dinner and offers to sell them Thiva gems in the mansion. Fupat tells them that he has been forced into the diamond business by his father. He reveals that now that his father is no longer alive, he wants to live life on his own terms. After dinner, when Padkara and Fetty leave, Upin confronts Fupat about his decision to sell the mansion. Fupat snaps and insults her and the other maids, saying they have no power in the house and are only in it for the money. He then throws some money at Upin and storms off in anger. The next day, Crit arrives at the mansion, and at that point, Fupat is the only one still living there. Crit shows Fupat a video of Rungroj signing his will. The video reveals that Rungroj names Kaimuk as the sole heir to his assets, with Kaimuk standing beside him. Fupat is shocked to learn that Kaimuk has known about Rungroj's will all along and seeks her out to confront her about her true intentions. Kaimuk confronts Fupat, and he accuses her of killing his father. A flashback shows that 4 years ago, Kaimuk applies to become a maid for the Thevasadat Pazern family. Padshah and Araya make Kaimuk and the other applicants strip naked for inspection. Although Kaimuk finds it strange, she complies and gets hired. When Upin takes her to the servants' quarters, Kaimuk notices a maid named Dao living next to her room, who looks exhausted and drained. Gradually, Kaimuk uncovers the dark secrets of the Thevasadat Pazern family. She witnesses Maven hooking up with Kayo in the bathroom and discovers that Fupat is addicted to drugs. At the same time, Rungroj starts paying attention to her, taking photos of her. Kaimuk grows close to him, simply assuming that Rungroj is a kind master with a peculiar love for butterflies. One night, Rungroj calls Kaimuk to the greenhouse where he keeps his butterflies and assaults her. Kaimuk returns to her room feeling humiliated and devastated. A few days later, she finds out that Dao has committed suicide and realizes that Dao had also been regularly assaulted by Rungroj. Kaimuk thinks about escaping but eventually accepts her fate and continues working at the mansion, engaging in a relationship with Rungroj. Over the years, she grows closer to Rungroj and promises him a child when he confesses that he has lost all hope in Fupat and Maven because he realizes they both hate him. Rungroj decides to name Kaimuk as his heir and promises all his wealth to the child she will eventually bear. In the present, Fupat accuses Kaimuk of killing his father, but Kaimuk tells him that all the evidence points to him as the murderer. On Rungroj's birthday night, Kaimuk laces his tea with Fupat's drugs. When Fupat comes to argue with his father, Kaimuk goes to Maven's room and gives him a fake termination letter, enraging him. A furious Maven storms into Rungroj's room to confront him. At this moment, Kaimuk uses an app on her phone to turn on the lights and release the butterflies. Rungroj, still high on drugs, hallucinates and, seeing a swarm of butterflies flying toward him, falls off the balcony to his death. Kaimuk manipulates Fupat into believing that he is the one who poisoned Rungroj and killed Maven. She then shows Fupat a video from the boat where he chokes and pushes Maven off. Joke films the entire incident, leaving Fupat unable to deny his guilt for killing his brother. It turns out that all the house servants conspire together to overthrow their masters because of how they are treated. Fupat, enraged, tries to strangle Kaimuk, but the servants appear and record the scene of Fupat attempting to kill his late father's wife. This forces Fupat to stop. A few weeks later, Fupat flees to the US and is seen drinking at a bar. While there, he watches the news and sees Padshah being interviewed about whether she knows her husband's whereabouts. Padshah denies knowing anything about her husband's crimes. As Fupat leaves the bar, a group of thugs ambushes him, stabbing him and stealing his money and watch, leaving him to die on the street. Meanwhile, Padshah travels to New York to find Kita, but Kita continues to ignore her mother's calls. Arata auditions for a new acting role and breaks down in tears. Remembering Shutter, who passed away after his heart transplant, at the mansion, Kaimuk and the other maids are now enjoying their lives and the luxuries they had always dreamed of. According to Rungroj's will, all of his assets, including 100% of Thiva gems, are passed on to Kaimuk. The servants take a group photo in the mansion, replacing the Thevasadat Pazern family portrait with one of all the male and female servants. The servants then celebrate, partying and dining at the table, now as the new owners of the house.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.